Hello again, this is Captain Chuck Griffin. I wanted to talk today about fishing for big bull redfish at the Charleston jetties. Mainly just about the rigs that we use and the bait that we use to catch these fish. It's a lot of basic information that can really help a lot of people out here with this. It's pretty much a standard rig I've used for 30 years or so. What I want to show you first here is my main setup. It's just going to be like a 30 to 50 pound class rod and reel. But what I like to do is have a slip sinker rig. Fish finder rig is what they call it. I first start out with braid. I'm going to pull this down here. And what I like to do first is tie monofilament leader into my braid. I usually use 60 to 80 pound, most commonly 60 pound. The knots I like to use more than anything else. My favorite knot is the FG knot. The second one I would say would be the uni to uni knot. Both of those knots can be found on the internet. You can find how to use them. The uni to uni knot is probably the easiest knot to tie monofilament into braid. But as you go along, if you start using the FG knot, it doesn't tend to grab the guides as well, and it casts a lot better because it doesn't grab the guides. It's a very smooth knot, and it takes some practice to learn, but it's something I think it's worth everybody learning, because it's once you learn it, it's going to be your favorite knot go-to. Because you really need the combination of monofilament onto braid. When you tie knots directly to terminal tackle with braid is so limp it tends to wrap around lures, it tends to wrap around your weights, your sliding sinker rig, and cause a lot of problems. What a lot of people do is they'll tie that braid directly into the leader part, and it wants to wrap around the weight with the sliding sinker rig. So this kind of helps you, it takes away the limpness of the braid. Let me reel this up here and I'll show you actually how I rig it. I like to at least have 15 to 20 feet of monofilament. I usually start out with more than I really need, because you end up cutting it back all the time when you have abrasions or the fish catches you in the rocks a little bit, or their teeth, or sharks, anything like that. First we like to use a fish finder I put on this. There are various brands, just what your favorite choice is. I generally like to use anywhere from 3 to 4 ounce lead, 2 to 4 ounce lead. My main thing with the lead is use just as much as you need, not too much. A lot of people tend to want to overdo it with 5 and 6 ounce leads. If you got to have that kind of lead to hold it down the current, you need to move to a different spot, because the current is too hard. The fish generally don't bite as well in that hard current, so find a spot where the current is running as hard, where you can fish a 3 ounce lead. And I like the bank sinkers and the flat sinkers. Don't use the triangle sinkers. They tend to grab the bottom more. It has nothing to do with the weight is. It has to do with, you end up getting snagged all the time and breaking them off, and it gets expensive after a while losing a lot of these with lead. But what I'll do is I'll tie usually just an improved clinch, uni knot, fisherman's knot, whatever you want to call it, to a swivel. You need just a basic barrel swivel that's big enough to not let the sinker slide come through it. And it's your personal choice. I use a little heavier one because we have a tendency to catch a lot of things like big sharks and things like that. So my tackle's a little beefier out there than it would be, like particularly for inshore, or if I'm just targeting maybe a casting 2 redfish on the surface somewhere else, because of the different species that we may run into. Big tarpon, the time that you finally hook the 100-pound tarpon by accident and you got 20-pound leader on there, you're gonna break him off. Our water is dark and pretty dirty out there, so it's not really affecting their sight. Like they won't shy away from it too much here. The way redfish are, when they're hungry, they don't care. They're particularly the big guys. There's more competition, so that they will attack these baits quickly. The second part of this leader, let me get to that, is I like to use anywhere from 60 to 80 pound monofilament on the bottom here. I start with about 12 to 16 inches. If you're having the fish that are really aggressive, this is important. I shorten the leader, because what they'll do is they have a tendency to swallow the hook, and you don't want to kill these big redfish. And when they swallow it, it's hard to get that hook out, and when you do, the surgery tends to make them bleed to death. So it's better to also leave that hook in there. If you see it down in there, just clip the monofilament as close to his mouth as you could. That's real important. But try not to go If the fish are really aggressive, if you use a longer leader, they will swallow it quicker. Second thing I should say about this front part of this leader is my hook. I prefer like a 6/0 size, maybe 7/0 size. Eagle Claw Circle C is a nice hook to have. The 6/0 Circle C. Also, owner makes a Mutu that's a 7/0 is a good size. It just depends on what you like, but you need a little bigger size because their jaw is a little wider. You want that gap to fit over their jaw, kind of like my finger here. Whereas inshore, you want a smaller hook because the fish are smaller generally. If you use a smaller hook out there too, they have a tendency to swallow it even more, and you don't catch them in the corner of the mouth like you should. So this is probably my go-to rig. I mean, anything, sharks, tarpon, it allows you to catch a lot of different things. And just by adjusting this end of length and things like that, you can catch a lot of fish with it. If I was just going to tarpon fish on the surface, all I would do was put a float, like a blue water Thunder or a really large float, maybe 3 feet above where the hook's going to be. I would generally go to a little bigger circle hook, like a 7 to 8/0 hook for a tarpon, because their jaw hinge is a little bigger, it gets over them, and you have less tendency for them to swallow it too. But for a surface rig, you just eliminate this, just put a float up there, have 3 to 4 feet of it. If you have much longer leader, it gets hard to cast, where you'll just have to let the line out, you can't cast it. So I kind of like it a little shorter than you would think. And those are the two basic rigs when it comes to the heavier tackle for big redfish. And like I said, I do prefer a little heavier outfit for that because you don't quite know what you're going to get into. Now there is a couple other things a couple other rigs I do like to use for the jetties. This is one of my go-tos when I'm casting while I'm maybe waiting for a bite on the big rods that are sitting on the bottom. Nothing can beat a little bucktail. And usually it's about a 3/4 ounce, ½ ounce, maybe up to an ounce, depending on the current. I'll do two things with a bucktail. What I like to do is I have at least 40 to 60 pound mono leader on there. Same kind of thing, run maybe 10, 12 feet of it on there. I like to use the Perfection loop or loop knot. It lets that bait swing around a lot better, more active when it's in the water. Gives a little more lively look. If I have some mud minnows with me, I like to tip it with a mud minnow. It seems to give it a little more action. If I don't, a grub tail works great too. Variations of this work fine. You can use a little bigger, I would use a little bigger grub tail, a little heavier head than I would inshore, up to an ounce, that kind of thing, because the current's going to keep it above, too high in the water column. But you can cast this right near the rocks. I always tend to cast ahead of the current and then work it back to me along the edge, real nice and slow, but just make sure it doesn't grab the bottom because you can lose this rig, but it can be very effective for big redfish. It's a lot of fun catching it on a little lighter rod like this. But I mainly target the bigger redfish with this kind of setup here. Now, a lot of people fish the jetties too with smaller outfits, and there's really a simple rig to use that we use inshore. If you're trying to catch flounder, smaller redfish, sea trout, ladyfish, bluefish, whatever, the standard fish finder rig, or Carolina rig as we call it, we use a slide and sinker. ½ ounce, 1/4 ounce is fine depending on the current. If you're fishing real close to the rocks in a place where there's not a lot of current, maybe at the slacker tides, definitely a way to catch a flounder. I like to use anywhere from 30 to 40 pound leader tied into the braid first, and then maybe somewhere like that 20 to 40 pound leader also to the hook, and only about 6 to 8 inches, or maybe at most 12 inches. And some of the hooks I really prefer the Mutu light, maybe 3/0. If the fish are smaller, maybe go a little smaller, a 2/0 hook. And owner makes it, this is a great hook. And you can use a variety of things, shrimp, minnows, even cut bait, cut menhaden, small menhaden, whatever your bait of choice is. But this is a good standard fishing rig, just like you would use on an inshore red fishing trip on the bottom. That's about it. Thank you very much.